Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast. This is episode 83 or 84?
That's either one sounds good to me.
Yes.
Yes, have some. So, today, we don't have any guests. It's just the three of us, crazy people. We're going to be talking about progressive web apps, frameworks, mobile apps, just some things that we've been kind of encountering in our daily routines or anti-routines.
Pretty much whatever we feel like talking about.
Yeah, pretty much. So I'll start it off. How do you guys feel about progressive web applications? Kind of loaded.
I'm not gonna lie, this is Danny, but I don't really know for the most part how I feel about it. I feel like it's right now the term doesn't mean a lot. It means a whole lot of things, and so by default, then also doesn't mean much. At least just on the very surface, that's how I'm viewing it. I mean, I know the idea of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of a progressive app is that it's an app that runs anywhere, is supposed to be the idea, right? In anywhere in any environment. So like I know Service Worker is a big part of making this stuff work. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally they give you an app-like experience, right? But with the sort of low friction that the web offers, where I don't have to go to an app store and do those sorts of things, yet I get a really cool, immersive sort of thing on my platform that looks very much like the typical thing that you may have installed on your mobile device or your desktop or your Chrome OS device, where I get a nice little fancy icon and I get a very nice sort of existing experience. The key being, of course, that it is progressive, that it works for everyone, everywhere, regardless of what you've particularly chosen, right? You don't have to, use all the fancy features. They should work like the responsive web does today, where we want to be able to sort of experience those overarching websites on whatever sort of magical screen that we may be on, whether it's your phone or your watch or your TV. So it's a very similar, I suppose, sort of approach on that. But obviously, you're right? There's connectivity independence. I can be online or I can be offline with things like Service Worker.
That seems to be, to me, that seems to be the big one, or like the main focus that a lot of, when a lot of people are talking about progressive web application, that's what a lot of people seem to be focusing on the most, is the offline stuff.
Well, I think that it's because of the nature of the way people want to use those sorts of applications. When we think about applications, we don't necessarily think about network connectivity, even though I think that for the most part, a lot of native applications would fail if they didn't have any network connectivity either. I can't get my tweets or whatnots because of that. So it's kind of this weird catch-22, right, where you end up with, I really want this very app-like experience where I do have this offline thing that runs. But then how do I handle that data? And Service Worker, which has been sort of in the works for quite a long time now, is a major part of that story.
Yeah, I think we should define kind of progressive web apps versus progressive enhancement, because those are two different things, right? But they're sort of tied together a lot.
Yeah, I think that. I think they're somewhat similar, right? I mean, just in the name, progressive, right? We don't want our applications to break, right? From a progressive web app standpoint or a progressive development standpoint, where we've graded your browser as a B browser. I have some of these things, but not all of these things. We still want it to work, and we shouldn't break the web in an attempt to make sure that we ship something that is not necessarily is really on the bleeding edge. Because I know as developers we like the bleeding edge. It's fun. You get to do lots of cool things, and you can have these very cool experiences. But that doesn't mean that it's very progressive, right? I can slice off things and say only use XYZ browser, and that's not a good experience for an end user. You want to be where your end users are, and that means sometimes making the determination that you get a slightly different experience, a progressive experience of what features you may have available to you on your particular target platform.
Yeah, I remember Leah Varot talked about progressive enhancement in one of her talks, and she had said that she likes a lot of the things that are sort of seamless in that sense, where if you have like background image, right, and you want to do, the background filters that are on there. Well, if you can set it up so that the image is still there, but the filter doesn't work on an older browser, they won't support that, but it'll work on the new one. So the enhancement part of that is like the adding of that, right? And so there's things like Flexbox, which, like only up to a certain point it'll be supported. You can't go back and just say, well, just use part of Flexbox or whatever, because it never existed at that point. So there's like a fine line in decision making where these are the options we have, and a lot of people offline. You guys mentioned is a new thing, I think, for people. It's not a new thing in development, but it's a new thing that we sort of look at a little bit more detailed. And so service workers kind of brought that forward in the web platform community, at least. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are afraid of that, but they don't realize that it's progressive enhancement. It's more like what Leah is talking about there, versus like, I'm going to break stuff if I put this in here. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I mean, you don't. I think a lot of people hear the term progressive web apps and think, well, I have to it's only going to ever work on these things. And if you've written your application correctly, you do get that sort of an experience. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same experience, right? Because you do have layered feature sets that may or may not be available to your target platform, depending on what you're on.
Does that fall in under progressive web apps, or is that progressive enhancement?
So yeah, that's the thing.
That feels more like progressive enhancement to me. For like Facebook is a good example, right, where they use desktop notifications now, where you can opt into, I guess not really desktop because they work on. I guess I don't know if they work on. I don't know. Let's call them desktop notifications.
Well, it uses the push API. So
yeah, but it only it's not like Facebook breaks if you are using a browser that doesn't support notifications.
Sure. Yeah, you either get those notifications based on your feature set or you don't.
Yeah. So, but that I bucket more into progressive enhancement more than progressive web app. But maybe they're actually closer than I'm giving them credit for.
Well, Google defines it as a progressive web app uses modern web capabilities to deliver an app-like user experience. They evolve from pages in browser tabs to immersive top-level apps, leveraging the web's low friction.
But you see what I mean? Like, to me, that doesn't really mean anything. Like, that sounds like a marketing pitch.
I'm sure it is, but I mean, enhancement. I agree with you. Like, progressive enhancement is like you're adding things like features, pieces. I think the web apps is like a higher level on top of that.
Maybe like I said, you're
more.
You're probably right. I also haven't done a ton of research.
But
I also haven't done a whole lot of research into it. I mean, I know it's starting to be a big thing that a big thing people are trying to start digging into. Like you said, like that app-like experience. I mean, because right now, which is why I do think the offline stuff. To me, the offline stuff is what really differentiates that from other things, because it does just let you run your applications in more environments. And by that I mean like actual environments. Like I take the train to work every day. I have 2 stops above ground where I have internet access, and then after that I don't. And then I can't use anything that requires any kind of network connectivity. So having and I actually run into this problem a lot, just like reading an article or something like that. If it's paged, where I'll finish one page and then I'll get into the tunnel and not think about it, and I'll hit the next one and it's gone. Nothing will load and I can't go back to the other page. But if it was something like if you could use some sort of offline capability to fetch the entire article or something like that, and then have access to it while I'm underground. I mean, a lot of the examples I think they use are pretty small, which I think is good. But like a weather one is another example of, just because I don't have network connectivity, I can't check the most recent weather I had on a website. Just because as soon as you don't have connectivity, you have no application at that point.
Sure. And I think the kicker is that beyond the offline portion, right? I know this website may be offline. Maybe it gives me some prompt that it is, whether it's a toast or some notification. Um, Remembering that as a different sort of user experience, right? I mean, this is why progressive web apps are more than simply the offline portion, where I get a very clean sort of app-like experience where there is an icon that sits. It looks normal to me. It's in my launcher of whatever device platform I so be on. That gives you that sort of thing. That gives you that, oh, I can just go tap you. I know that I eventually had gone to that website because it prompted me to add to my home screen because I get an offline experience. And again, you have that zero friction, right? You're doing this normal sorts of things that you may be doing, like browsing a web or reading an article, and these things sort of piece together to give you that very nice sort of fluid experience, as opposed to, like you said, like the multi-page. Which, by the way, if you're running multiple pages for your articles, I understand you need the ad revenue, but man, is it annoying! Like, of all paradigms to have, I'm sorry, I know this is off topic at this point. Please don't do that. Justin's kind request to the people of the web world: just give me one sheet so I can read.
It's hard though, because it's not just development. You have to worry about, like, there's other groups like for instance SEO, right? Search engine optimization. That stuff I've been having to research a lot lately. So pagination, actually, if you were you can have like rel equals next and rel equals previous or prev, right? And that'll enable you to have the crawlers actually follow those particular pagination pieces. So if you did like a mobile, I'm going to do an infinite scroll on there, that's not as useful as doing like pagination in that sense.
Well, I think infinite scroll. I think that's talking about something else, because that still requires. I think the point is one of the points is don't require more requests. Just give me all of the text at once.
Well, and at the same time, though, right? I mean, it goes to your architecture, right? How am I going to define? Like, I might have a different user experience. I may have that article split into 3 pages with engine optimizations to allow crawlers to see it in a more reasonable fashion. But from a user perspective, that doesn't mean that it has to be slow either, right? Because if we have these sorts of new APIs that are available to us in browsers, we can do really cool things, like service worker thing, where I already have cached out those other pages because they were part of this payload that I had, and now I don't have to go re-request them. I can go forward and back and not lose data. But that also talks to, does your page have a shell, right? How much of it will work offline? Do the requests sort of inject inside of it that allow you to sort of stay in that very app-like experience where you don't get consistent page paints and blinks on those things? That takes a little bit of architecture, and you sort of have to step back and say, how do I want this application to perform?
Yeah, low-quality networks, too, is another thing, too, like you said. So if you're pulling in like a giant blob of JSON, and that encompasses 10 pages or 15 pages, that might not be viable for a good, user experience in that case.
I mean, then we're talking about architecture again.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've started to get away from, so again, one of the big things not really one of the big things, but the idea is okay, I visited this website. You can always, and you like on iOS, it's add to home screen and that kind of stuff, and there you have it. And I actually do that a lot now. I know I live in the DC area. WMATA, the transit system, is not the most reliable at times, we will say. It tends to catch fire, but that's fine. But I don't download any of their applications from the App Store. I just use the website, save it to the home screen, and use that as my access point to the information that I need. So if the more applications are kind of really geared, and really as long as you have a decent mobile experience, that type of stuff works fine. And then you can really start getting into these other progressive things we were talking about. Like, I don't know. Do notifications work on mobile? I know I kind of asked that earlier, but I don't.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
Push API landed a few revisions back in Chrome
Okay.
and in Firefox.
Cool.
What about Safari though? Like,
Not in Safari. They're not. They don't work in Safari.
yeah.
That
So
I do.
iPhone's done.
Well, because even the even Chrome on Safari isn't Chrome on.
Right.
It's WebKit Chrome. So.
No, it's Safari.
But I would.
Pretty.
But I do use stuff that way. So having more of those things there makes a lot of sense because I don't like I hate, like, if you go to CNN, almost any website, and you get those banners, click here to go download our native application. I'm already here. Just give me the thing that I want.
I really love when they stack up. Like, it's my favorite thing on the web. I'm thinking I'm going to start a blog. Just, install my app. Here's 3 banners I've given you to help you understand that I have an app.
Yeah, no, that
the app has 1/10 of the features my website does, but it's okay. Don't worry, it's fine.
Interstitial screens are worse. It could be an interstitial screen.
It could be, and then we could all cry.
Yeah, that's something that's crazy to me. Is like when you're building these apps and you have, is it like when you do mobile first development, even then. Like, if you're shimming things in to make something mobile first, however you want to say it, then it's going to be, people are going to start to make decisions of what do we cut, and that's awful. Like, if you build out from the bottom, you can add whatever you subtract that's bad, and I don't know, it's painful to like use an app like.
Planning is hard.
Trying to think of an instance, like, yes, it is, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing. But it's so frustrating to go to a web page on your laptop and then go to the mobile version of that, use an app or use the mobile site, whichever, and half of the features are gone.
Yeah.
And again, I think that goes to architecture, because at the end of the day, like, I realize that you can't shim all the things that fit on a high-resolution monitor that sits on a desktop somewhere, or your laptop, or whatever, into tinier screens. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't get the feature, right? Like, you can readjust to fit your target platform.
If it exists in its functionality, how it looks, or how its user experience is it doesn't have to be exactly, but it should be there. You should have access to it.
I have another random question for you guys while we're still talking about we were talking about interstitial screens and stuff like that. Have you got one thing that I'm very glad I've stopped seeing a lot of are those little pop-up banners that say add to home screen?
Oh God, yeah.
You guys remember seeing a lot of those?
I remember having to build one. It's awful.
Yeah. It is. It's really bad, especially on Android. It's just like you can't. It doesn't work that way. There's too many buttons, too many variations. But I'm glad that I don't see those anymore.
Well, now that's actually a feature in Chrome, right? I mean, if you visit, I cannot remember what's the heuristic at the moment. If you visit a site a few times within X amount of, if you visit a site over a certain span of time, it'll actually pop for you the Chrome Add to Home Screen button, which is really cool. But you only get that if you basically have a progressive sort of a web app experience. You have a manifest, you have a service worker, that sort of thing, which is key, because then you know that when you add that thing to your home screen, it actually does work. Whereas before, when when we all had, hey, I want to add this to my home screen, make the arrow swiggle thing that pops and fits, and by the way, it doesn't look right because I have this weird, horrible virus that attacked me. I don't know where it came from. Why is half my screen blank? I don't know. Those were the bad days, right? You add things to the home screen that don't do anything, right? They didn't give you a better experience. They just gave you a faster, like a bookmark.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, that's still kind of what they are. That's mostly what people use them for. It's because so I can get to things faster. But now we are starting to have the ability to do this. We said like less friction, like there's less friction on the web, right? Like you just go to a website and there you are. It's not a go to the App Store. Now download this.
Yeah. No, this is true.
That's one of the things that Google also defined as part of progressive web apps is they need to be installable. So if they're not installable like an app, they
So
need to
what
be
does
some
what
add to home screen or something like that.
I was about to say, what does installable mean?
Yeah, so it's just a way to have users like keep the apps is how they put it.
Could that
So
be using something like Electron or something like that for desktop?
yeah, you could do it that way. Yeah, I mean some way that's installable. Re-engageable is another one that they talk about. Um, so
Again,
like the push
I would just like to
notifications
know.
is under that,
Yeah.
like what we were just talking about before.
Again,
Um,
I would like to know exactly what that mean what they mean by installable, because I mean because one of the because they also talk about frictionless. One of the big things about about going to a website is that you don't have to install anything, is that you just have it. Um, so I'm
Well, I think
curious.
the installable portion goes back to I have a particular shell that is offline with certain parts of data, right? So, for an example, when you're on the tube or whatever, and you're trying, any public transit system that doesn't work, I'm sure there's a few out there everywhere. Um, this is a classic example, right? I still want the power of my web, but I don't necessarily want the friction that comes with finding that thing in an app store or dealing with my login credentials or some random thing that often stops us. And I think everyone has had that experience where you know what, I'm going to download the app. I see the pop-up. I'm going to be stuck somewhere where I don't have connectivity. Maybe that app will work better. And it gives you that weird install experience, right? I sit there, I wait for 20 megs of data to download. Maybe it downloads, maybe it installs. I open it up, and then it still doesn't really work, right? I still don't have any data within that shell. So on the website of life, it's very similar, right? The progressive web app sort of structure is I have a manifest that tells me about my application. I have icons that are targeted towards platforms. I know that it's locked down, right? So it's going to run over TLS, which is the only way you're going to get a service worker to run anyhow. That service worker is going to basically cache out my app shell, and that shell is going to fill with data that I can then subsequently cache based on my first experience. So that first experience might be the very moment you first load that application.
So you think do you think that would fall under? I don't know why I'm so caught up on the term install, but do you think that would qualify, like as the service worker spins up and is caching your things? Like, does that count as the install in this case?
Yeah, to some extent, yes, because you're basically getting the state of your initial load, so to speak, and it's seamless to the end user. I mean, I at this point I've written 3 or 4 sort of PWAs of varying types, and it's a very seamless experience. They don't even your user doesn't even necessarily know they're having this sort of experience unless you really want to tell them about it, or they'll find out themselves if they're using Chrome or Opera or anything that basically has the add to home screen banner at the moment, which is a very seamless sort of experience because it pops up. It's very clean. It's not. It's only after the user has used your particular application. Now, they can still pin it to add to home screen, which if they want to, they can do it right out of the gate. There's some examples out there now, sort of, and I know Opera has a PWA list, and there's a couple other lists out there of progressive web apps that are sort of coming to the forefront. But yeah, it's not necessarily the same sort of experience. Now, I mean, it can obviously differ. If I'm building a sort of browser-based game, I may have a prime, right? I may have a prime action that says, I actually have a whole bunch of assets. You're going to have to wait a second while I go get them, which is not unlike other sort of game platformy things where I'm loading level data or those sorts of things. And that's going to have a different experience, right? I'm going to tell the user more about what's happening. I have a lot of assets to load. Here are my models. Here are my textures, yada, yada, yada. And I might have some progress bar or some such.
As opposed to a frozen screen and that's doing
exactly.
Something, but you don't actually
yeah, right. You want to show some movement of the thing, which is why we have things like skeletons and now and whatnot to get us to those really fast first paints that we want. That way, the user knows things are happening even as a significant amount of data may be occurring in the background, or maybe not data. Maybe it's just simply a matter of your application framework spinning up based on whatever it was built in. So you can use a lot of these techniques together to sort of give you this really sort of cool experience. And it does. It's really sticky. Like, having done a few now and sort of seeing how users interact with them, it's pretty crazy. Your engagement goes up quite a bit. Where you're getting 2-page views on a particular cycle, we see like 5-6 page views, primarily because the speed is there. If you've defined your architecture correctly, you can start smaller, particularly with Service Worker, where you just want to cache certain things. But yeah, I mean, from an install, yeah, I mean, the word installable is a bit of a interesting word because it's definitely not it's not necessarily the same experience you're going to get with installing from an application store.
Well, you just showed me that Remy Sharp actually had an article recently on Medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Remy Sharp at Rem.
I think so.
And he was talking about the same exact thing, like with the web apps and discoverability, progressive web apps.
So I was actually going to ask about that because discoverability is actually, if we are really starting to treat websites more as applications as we think of them on our phones or on the desktop, discoverability is already a problem
huge problem
for applications in app stores, especially on iOS. Now there are tons of apps on the App Store. There are even more websites out there. Now, right now, there aren't a ton that are progressive, so there's kind of a novelty when you find one that's like, oh, this is doing something interesting, or this is using some kind of technology, but that's mostly stuff for us, right? Like, there's very few instances that I've personally been able to find where it's actually, like, oh, this is something that is for sure for the consumer of whatever this content is that you're putting out. So, how do you think discoverability will be a problem, or do you think it pretty much stays exactly the same way as it is? Now there's just a different way to consume the same content that you were just viewing on your browser anyway.
Well, I mean, from a sort of testing things that I've deployed recently standpoint, discoverability works roughly the same. I mean, there are some sort of tricks you have to do to make sure that your search engines and whatnot find things, and at the moment they're really not taking into effect things like manifests at the moment, or at least I don't believe they are.
But it's good to note that we have that, though.
Yeah, I mean, realistically,
may be useful down the road.
Well, Google's crawler will run JavaScript. I think we've all known this for a while. I mean, it's in their docs. In terms of finding all the sort of newer features that are within those scopes, not quite yet, is my understanding. But as long as we still build sort of the experiences where, because we can update metadata for particular targets, even if we're moving within an app shell, whether it's just your typical meta tags or the title of your particular page. You can use build systems and structures to sort of give you, I suppose, varying shells if you really wanted to, as well, that give you sort of that discoverable, I want to search for something and I find something on the web, as opposed to I need to go into this app store with a category and then I have to shuffle through a whole bunch of stuff. So you get and you get linkability too, obviously. I mean, one of the things that makes the web so sticky and frictionless is that I can post a link to anything I want on my blog, and it's going to go to that thing, and you don't really have to do anything. You don't need an app. You don't need this other thing. It just works. And crawlers say, oh, hey, that goes over there. Yippee skippy for me. And to some extent, I mean, native sort of is going that way. I mean, that's why they have app deep leaking, for instance, in Android. And I believe iOS has something very similar. So you end up with this people trying to sort of do what the web already does on those things, because that's discoverability to some extent.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that native had to. They have that problem, which the web solves just by being what it is, and the web is currently trying to solve for problems that native solves by just being what it is. So it is definitely like the two kind of inching closer together. And Google did some. Was it just at I/O last year when like they were showing like the seamless move from like a website to an app or something like that, and like there was no real difference to the user. I think that was just in the last one. I don't have an Android phone. Well, I have a work one, but it's dead, and I have to turn it in soon anyway. I'm serious. I thought when I first got a work phone, I was like, this is awesome. I have my iPhone that I use for this, and I have my Android phone. I cannot keep up with two phones at all. at all. It's been dead
I can
for a
barely
minute.
use one. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know how some people do it. Like the head of engineering here in the studio, just walk around with one phone in each hand, looking at both. I can't do that at all. Man.
I'm with you, Danny.
But so I don't know a lot about it, but because on iPhone currently, like a lot of apps use like the in-app browser now, right? So like if you go to a link from Facebook, you're still in Facebook. You're just using a browser inside, and then you can opt to open it in Safari or something like that. But I always kind of found those a little bit annoying. If it was just faster to go from one to the other, you wouldn't need that. But that seems to be the current solution on iOS.
I don't know, when I'm in like mobile Chrome or mobile Safari on iOS, like and I click on a link, it's going to open up Facebook. I like the fact that it just goes to the app, the way that I set it up.
Well, so that I like. So that's the other way around. So that's great. That I like a lot. Or so like even like from your email or something like that, and you click on like a LinkedIn link or something like that, it still has to open up the website first, like just for a second, but then it opens up the app straight away. That I like, but it doesn't really work the other way around as much. Well, a lot of the best solution people seem to have found for going from an app to a web page is to actually have an embedded web viewer in the application. I mean, Hangouts does the same thing, right? So if you get a link on Hangouts, you open it up, and it moves to a different, and it opens the web view in the app rather than jumping straight. It treats applications as separate. So you can have a link that will open up a different application from Hangouts, for example, but it doesn't treat the web app as kind of that first-class citizen. It gives you a viewer, and then it will open it inside of, rather than saying like, okay, open this, just open this up on its own.
Yeah, on the note of discoverability too, with all this stuff. I mean, the research that I've been getting from search engine optimization is that Google had stopped using certain types of JavaScript SEO optimizations a while back, and when they do it, there was a recent article I read where they talked about what you can do and what you can't do, and so I'm still very vague on the whole subject. So I'd really like to get somebody to talk to about how it parses the DOM. So, for instance, Shadow DOM, I don't know for sure, but based on my discussions with Rob Dotson, that Shadow DOM you can have any of the content that's rendered in there, which is what I'm most concerned about, will get parsed through that. So the content is good. So, like for instance, iframes and document fragments, no surprise, they don't typically get anything in there, right? It's just it's a black box. But for discoverability of these things, I'm not sure if we're really up to that level with JavaScript in the search engines yet.
I don't know. Real quick, guys, I have to jump off for much more boring work type things, but yeah. So please feel free to continue. I would like to talk. I would like to get some more people on to talk more about this stuff, because I think. Yeah. I think there are a lot of people like me that are like just the terminology is tripping. Like I know trips me up a lot when talking about some of this stuff. Like my brain almost melted with install when I was like, you don't install a website. So I would like to talk more about this stuff, but unfortunately I have to go. So thank you guys very much, and I will talk to you probably tomorrow.
Yep. Thanks, Danny.
See you there, Danny.
Bye, guys.
I missed him already.
I know. He's gone. He's into the ether now.
So tell me what you think about responsive inside of these things. So do they have to be progressive web apps be responsive?
I suppose they don't. I mean, I'll be honest. I have a progressive web app that's not responsive at the moment. That's very specific to an internal sort of thing, but But
it should fit all of the target form factors.
No? Well, I think in Justin's perfect sort of development world, yes, everything fits everywhere. But unfortunately, I don't live in a perfect development world. I live with people who have particular needs, and I think that a lot of
Yeah.
developers do. And I think the one problem that folks have is that they get tugged a lot of different ways. Like, why doesn't your thing work on mobile? Is one
Mhm.
I hear a lot.
Or the
And
CEO says, "Hey, I tested this on my iPad, and suddenly you have a new target."
yeah, no, exactly. And you're like, well, the requirement was that it was supposed to work on 47-inch screens. It was never supposed to work on that thing because it was designed for a particular target. Should we keep designing applications that way? I don't know. I think it really depends on
Yeah.
your specification. And I think it'll always sort of be that choosy sort of way. Do I think if you have a consumer thing that it's not mobile, it should be mobile? Yes, I do. Because I look at the way people use their stuff now, whether it's my youngest daughter or my wife or anybody at the office, like phones dominate like your general sort of thing, whether you're at lunch or just running around. Um, Mobile will, I mean, and the stats support that. Like, people are like, oh, I'm not convinced. It's,
We're in denial because we're living in a world where a lot of the development we have to do is, internal businesses, applications that are only viewable by people who are working in productivity stuff that's on the laptop or on their desktops.
yeah, no. And I think, again, do those things need to be mobile? Do I need to spend time to make them responsive? I definitely think they need to be responsive to some extent. I don't think you can get away with a pure hard-coded shells these days. I think that's kind of harsh. And I really haven't done that on desktop for a lot of years now. I don't, with the screen variances, like there's just no point to it, I guess. Unless, of course, I'm doing display things where I know that I'm at X resolution and it's going to play on giant screens. I guess that's a little different of a situation.
I just got pinged by Cornell from the Read the Source podcast, and he's listening, and he's saying regarding responsiveness, if the app is public, then Google will test if it's mobile friendly. Yes, there is a mobile friendly tester, definitely, in order to rank it. So should we be concerned about that at all?
You should be, because yes, Google. If you're searching for things on Google now, it's going to take into account whether you're mobile friendly or not. PageSpeed Insights actually has a flag for this that you can use in the beta version online that'll actually test for mobile readiness, whether if you're using the API. Otherwise, you can just use the web tool. I believe someone has an extension for it as well. But yes, if you have a public thing that is not mobile ready, you should probably be mobile ready at this point.
I've been using it recently. It is a very cool tool, and it shows you what you need to do to fix the things that are wrong.
Yeah, and we actually wrote a tool at the office last year that's open source. It's written in Go and it's still in Polymer 0.5, but it's basically it uses the API to do large scale tests against websites. We actually did it for local businesses in an attempt to get them to be more mobile friendly by just simply showing them page speed, insight scores, and mobile readiness scores. And you would be surprised how many people will jump at the time. Oh, I need to fix that. Because once they have data, like data is a very powerful thing to make people sort of understand the progression of where things are going. And that's important for businesses who aren't necessarily in the business of the web. For us as developers, it becomes very, we can get caught up in the sort of minutia of, everyday sort of development life where we know these things to be self-evident based on the data we have. But your average small business may not. So it's on GitHub. I'll put a link in the show notes for those who really want to test a lot of things fast against that API.
Definitely. I hope that answers the question. It did for me, but I hope that answers it for Cornell. Some of the other things I'm looking through the list right now that Google has listed for how they defined progressive web apps, because I think that's a big push for developers having to build on different platforms and devices. So I think they're doing a really good job putting out information about it. But one of the things is like, you mentioned earlier TLS,
mm-hmm.
right? So they say safe. and safe is sort of, I don't know, iffy. I think TLS, you need to be on a certain version, right? And a lot of people don't. To upgrade to newer versions is hard for some people, and even to get HTTPS across things is difficult. Which, by the way, has very little impact on SEO, even though HTTPS, you would think because of that handshake, it's pretty bad. It's not. It's not that bad. But I think more for security, you want to have that HTTPS and the
Well,
TLS, the highest you can have.
well, yeah. I mean, I mean, there has been a lot of changes in terms of the way we sort of view how the web operates in terms of security these days. One is that Google search rather uses HTTPS as a signal in terms of search ranking. It's one of a lot of signals they have. It's not like the end all be all signal, but that was sort of I think wake up call for some who were like, oh well, I don't want to have to deal with TLS and certs and pinning and all these things that sound very complicated because they can be complicated.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, user privacy and security is also very important. Beyond the fact of progressive web apps. Obviously, Service Worker is designed to work on top of HTTPS because it would be very, very bad to be man in the middle by someone who's taking over your Service Worker. These would be bad things. And there was a lot of debate early on the mailing list of people who are like, no, it should just run over HTTP, which no, it should not. That is not a good thing. And please don't think that. It's not a good idea.
It has access beyond the page.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that people misunderstand just how, because if you, to some extent, we have it pretty good, right? You don't get man in the middle, well, necessarily as much. I'm making a generalization that I don't particularly like at this point, now that I've said it. But at the end of the day, you can be man in the middle fairly easily. Just look for really bad Wi-Fi and then watch ads get injected randomly into your stuff. There's lots of companies who make those sorts of things. So, and I just horrible things. But yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that you have some integrity in the sort of data that you send, both to your client, what serves out of your Service Worker, what serves to your end user. And it's a little easier now. I mean, I think that beforehand there was always the TLS and SSL are very, very slow. I have to run a lot more hardware to make it work. I don't think that's the case. There's been a lot of research on that pretty much shows that that's not the case.
It adds a little, but not as much as people think.
At scale, I mean, I've run enough things at scale at this point, and not necessarily, I would say, at Google scale or maybe Netflix scale, but it runs pretty well. Like, I don't see major cost increases across the board for that. In terms of, the ability to actually get certificates and whatnot, we have Let's Encrypt now, which is really, really awesome. And if you haven't tried it, I recommend it because it's pretty cool. And you can wire up your website into secure LAN for free. And it's got a really cool little set of tools that you can use on the command line.
Yeah, you have to re-up every 90 days, but it's a small price to pay for that.
And you should automate that. It should be an automated thing, which, I think there are a lot more tools being written right now for that. And they have free certs on AWS now, too.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. Yeah,
it's part of, you can have certs issued and whatnot. I forget which region it's in currently. But yeah, they have that. And it's really somewhat never been easier to wire up things securely. I mean, to some extent, that's why I use App Engine a lot, right? I can push and use AppSpot's cert straight away, and I get H2 to boot. So,
well, that's the other thing too. Is I think Google's really pushing HTTPS. Yes, because it's secure, but also because now we can start decreasing latency and get some stuff like HTTP2 on board, because they won't implement it without that. And I think other people
also
are going to be on board with it. But as
Yeah.
far as like SEO goes, I was surprised to find out that while it doesn't hurt you, which I was thinking it might, to have HTTPS on there for your SEO ranking, just because of how long it might take to load the page, but it actually helps, to your point. But the amount that it helps might not be worth it in the SEO regard. So I don't know if I would put it as a Like,
I think it's one of those nice add-ons, right?
yes,
Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, we're as web developers, you're always sort of chasing the signal, right?
yeah.
You
And I'm
know
still
signals
learning the SEO
exist,
stuff. It's been like 6 years since I actually looked at the stuff, and now I'm having to really take a hard look at it. So,
and it's changed quite a bit. And some of it, I mean, the nice thing is there's lots of guidelines out there where it's fairly clear as to what to do, both good for you and good for users. Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's white space keyword packing hiding anymore. Maybe they are. I don't know if they exist anymore. Old days. Look at all my hidden text on this page. Ooh, I'm really being rebellious against the spider indexing system, which made me laugh 10 years ago, just as much as it makes me laugh now. But
it's a
yeah,
lot of information for sure.
it is. Yeah, I mean, it's like everything else, right? An outsider looking in may go, "Oh, it seems very simple. I put some text somewhere and things happen." Not so much.
No, not so
A little
much.
bit, but not so much.
Yeah, there's one thing on here I'm looking at, app-like. So it feels like an app style interactions, navigation, like an app shell model. So I saw recently on Aurelia, I was listening to, I think it was .NET Rocks podcast, and I was looking at some of the Aurelia stuff that Rob's been doing over there, and I love the approach where it's very to the metal, very modular, very progressive with the way that they're building these pieces to build an application. And one of the things they had on there, which I was kind of like, I'm not sure if I like this, but it seems to be in the same model, is they had Aurelia interface, or Aurelia UI interface, something like that. And that takes your CSS and basically makes, depending on what device you're on, it'll change your CSS to modify to be similar to that device's common UX patterns.
Oh, it's interesting.
So it's interesting. Like, I don't know if I like it or dislike it though, because I think a consistent experience across platforms and devices is much more important than having, well, this looks like an Android application, or this looks like a Windows Phone application. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that's tough, because there is a very fine line between is the functionality you're gaining from that, the fact that it meets the paradigm for your target, more than had you simply defined a good base target to begin with, I guess. I don't know if I'm terming that or wording the things correctly in that, but I mean, because obviously a UI that works on iOS may not work on Android, may not work on your television, or some
Right.
other platform device. I maybe get very, very specific as to how I want that functionality to work. Beyond small screen, bigger screen, and more along the lines of this is UI pattern. But yeah, I'm curious. I will have to take a look at that, because I haven't really done. I haven't done apps like that in a while. In terms of, oh, I'm going to target each one of these things specific to their pattern. Usually, or at least for the stuff we're building, like a lot of the times,
I think it's
just
impressive and very cool. I just don't know if it's
no.
a better experience.
I think it's hard. I think it's very hard to do.
Yeah, like kudos to them.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to do that. I will gladly use it,
No,
but I don't.
especially since some of the not only the UI but the UX is very different. The user experience flow, like how things interact, is different sometimes on those.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully not very different, but it's
They used to be really different, but I think it's strange to some extent, because it's changed a lot. I think when everyone used to apply, here's my iOS navigational scheme for my WordPress blog,
So like copy and paste stuff, which is something like not necessarily UI driven, but more of like flow driven. Like that's still very different on iOS and Android. That's the only one I could really think of offhand.
Yeah, I agree. Like the flow is key. But again, I think it also depends on what you're trying to do. Like, I think if you step back and look at the strengths of each platform, they have a lot of crossover in terms of how I can present data to people and have them understand what I'm trying to lead them to do. I want you to press this button. I want you to have this sort of experience. May look a little bit different, may not fit identical to the design paradigm, but the design is still solid. Because there are a reason they call them guidelines and not requirements.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah, well, that's what I keep telling myself. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I think that that can be a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. It's not a problem that I have an answer for. Like it's like
if you have an answer, please let us know on the hotline.
It really comes down to the old saying from freelancers, like it depends, right? So it's and I hate saying that, but it does.
Right. It always depends. Like. But I think I've never met a software developer that doesn't say that at some point. They're like,
yeah, I've been guilty. Sorry.
Yeah, I say it all the time, and then people just kind of rubbing their eyebrows, going, "I just do something." I don't know.
Well, there's two things that we didn't talk about that are on this list, so we did pretty good. The one thing is fresh, so keeping data up to date. And the application in a state that is up to date, and I think that's important, because if you have interactions that are live or real time, or even if you don't, just to have the same information in like on there that other people might see. Yeah, I think there's a flexibility there, but fresh is definitely one of the things they suggest is to use Service Worker to keep that all fresh, but. There's other ways to do it as well.
Well, I think you have to understand the life cycle, right? When you have data and however you define your service worker to handle those sorts of that sort of data, right? You want to make sure the user's aware of it, how you swap data out, whether you're using a cached copy or the current copy, understanding how your connectivity works, because I don't think there's one blanket approach. You really do have to look at the content you want to serve.
Yeah, and have you done linkable, which is the last one that we haven't covered? Have you done that in your progressive web apps?
Yeah, one of which is we sort of rehashed an old Chrome experiment that we had called Ginger, which was a WebGL morph target demo, which was pretty popular for a long time on Chrome experiments. We rehashed it into a progressive web app, which is actually really cool because the model is quite large, and Service Worker really sort of makes it shine, where you get this really sticky experience. But the one thing that we added to it, which was a feature that people requested for years and years, was that I really want to share my pose. For a while, like screenshots would just show up in our inbox and on Reddit and stuff, people posing the model in particular ways with silly sort of facial expressions. And so what we did was we created it's a very linkable thing. You can share your pose, and it's all client-side stuff. Like there's no server interaction whatsoever. And you can share that link, and it's instantly linkable. There's no special app to install. You click that link, it's going to open that page. If you don't have Service Worker, it's not a big deal. It'll still run that WebGL. If you don't have WebGL, it'll try to fall back even then. But I don't know a lot of things that aren't WebGL compatible at this point. And yeah, it's very yeah, right. All the IEs. But yeah, it's very linkable, right? You get, again, that low friction. Like there's no magic sauce plugins to use or any of that. You just paste the link to wherever you want to go, and it's going to load that particular target straight away. And even admittedly, I've rolled the dice on PWAs quite a bit lately. We rolled out a new corporate website. It's all PWA. Has all linkable stuff from the blog on up. If it didn't, then we would have zero search engine and zero findability, but it all works. And that's actually, at least in my mind, it's one of the easier things to accomplish in it, because as long as you understand how the web works, you can still get a very linkable experience between things, whether it's within your app shell or not. And the cool thing is that with Thing, you don't have to use hash bangs anymore, right? Like, understand how your server orients links into your app shell, and then you're good to go. And there's some good examples on GitHub now about how to do that. So you get this same sort of look you've always wanted in your URLs. I mean, we converted one of our sites over into a PWA, kept the same URLs, no problem. So linkability does work, and it works quite well. It doesn't break the web,
Yeah, are there any good on GitHub? Have you seen any good, like, I guess, scaffolds for progressive web apps?
Yeah, I think there's a few that are out there now. In terms of pure, the app shell sort of experience, because I think one of the key things that makes progressive web apps really sticky is this concept of an app shell, which is just basically you can think of it as your base frame. For listeners out there who are going, I don't understand what a shell is. It's this notion of just the bare bones minimum of things that you need your application to run in. Without that data, right? There's a separation of these things. And I think that we'll start to see a lot more. I mean, there's quite a few people who are working on various ones for framework integrations. And, I'm working on one for a couple of the blog engines or the static generators that are out there, like Hugo and Jekyll, which I've been banging on for I have 2 blog posts that are sitting in queue right now that I need to publish on it about how to shell them.
I'd like to read that.
I think other people would probably too. I should really clean up those blog posts as they sit there going, Justin, publish me, and please publish all the samples that go with them. So I think there are people out there who are doing that sort of work now, where they're trying to figure out what exactly a good app shell looks like, and that's hard. Because I think it's going to vary a little bit based on framework. Obviously, you're going to have it's more than just the shell, right? You still want the performance out of it. You don't want to. It's like anything else. Don't build just to build. Like, have a goal, and have a actual target goal of I want this much. I want my first paint like this, and I want this shell to be able to render this data, and I want to be able to access all this when I'm on a horrible bus ride, through a mountain pass or something. So yeah, there are quite a few shells. I'll stick some links.
Or on a plane even.
Or even on a plane, yes, because I hear in-flight Wi-Fi is all the rage these days. And by rage, I mean, who's the person watching Netflix at HD resolution? I need to know, because I just want to get things on. And please don't clone. Why are we cloning the internet when we're on planes? Is this a thing still?
Have you NPS at 5,000 feet away?
I have not. No. I respect other passengers on the plane.
NPM install. Oh no, we're gonna crash.
I feel like that's. I feel like that's half the conferences I go to now. Look at this cool thing I wrote on NPM. And then everyone goes to install it and then goes, everyone, you just broke half the internet in Wisconsin. Like, what happened?
I'm going to kick this out. Thanks.
Yeah. Why did you break the conference center? Sirens are going off. It's chaos.
So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you a question. Do you feel like, because I'm torn on this one, man. Do you feel like if a progressive web app, PWA, is really a PWA, if you brought out your 486 from the closet, dusted it off, like that that's like circa 1995 computer, for those of you who don't know, right? And then you opened it up with Netscape, whatever version that is, should it work? I'm not saying it should look pretty, but should it work?
I think that you're going to get a degraded experience. So I think that you ideally you get some rendering of the content you're looking at. And that's, again,
Yeah.
Justin's pie in the sky. I want content regardless of, it's like when I would load links. Like, I just want content right now off the thing. Is that, is it the best experience? No.
No.
But should my thing still work? And I think to some extent, yes, but is it, am I going to make a significant amount of design changes to make sure that I run a Netscape 4.7? Probably not.
That's awesome that you know the version.
I did a lot of work on Netscape 4.7 for way back when, for this app that we had done, and I know a lot of quirks about the 4X line of Netscapes, which at this point, which is not going to help me, I don't think, at all ever again. But it got me through that period of a interesting part of the web's timeline.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy question to ask. I had to throw it out there, though. That question is like a total blank question.
Is your stuff going to run? Is your stuff going to run in the old Netscapes and IEs of yore?
Run and like, sure.
I see some stuff. I see your name. Like, you're the author on this blog post. Is it gonna? Yeah. Is your name gonna show up on the blog post? Because
I mean, at that point, if you're using Ajax, it's not gonna even load, right? So
this is true.
It's kind of like, are we being too ridiculous to go back to say, well, if it's on the web, it should just work, right? Or should we have realistic back targets like normal people, like realistic. Sane people do?
Yeah, no, I think you have to be sane. I mean, again, I think you can do a lot of tricks to get content where you want it to go. I can just render text on the web, right? I don't have to use JavaScript. I don't have to do anything. I can just render static things like we used to, with horrible navigational schemes and all kinds of things. But it did work, and obviously it worked well enough that low friction allowed the web to grow to what it was today. Because we wouldn't be having this conversation about, should I go back in time, right? And
we'd be talking about Windows apps, right?
Yeah, we'd be talking about Windows apps, more than likely, and
XAML.
Or Palm OS apps, because I still love Palm OS. Yeah,
Palm OS, that was the bomb.
Yeah, still have my Palm 5 from way back when. But I don't think that Duval just walking through the frame, knowing the podcast. Yeah, see, just
Duval's awesome.
I know. Yeah, Duval should be on. I don't know why he's not on the podcast right now. Probably because he was just on the phone and I was bugging him. But
busy doing work.
No, never. So I think that we do have to understand. I think it's great to see that progressive nature. Is it realistic all the way to the back of time? I don't know that necessarily is. Maybe in a perfect world, but I don't have the time. Like, honestly, I don't think a lot of people have the time. I'm really happy if it runs in IE at this point, depending on what its target is.
Yeah, I think we're looking back to like most places, IE 10 or 11 now. 10, it is like, even 9 in some places, and if you're in the government or some other companies that have to deal with this, IE 8. If you're on IE 7, you're going to be out of business soon. So,
you do have to move forward. I think that's the one thing that, and I don't think we've forgotten. I think we complain about it a lot, or at least I complain about it a lot. Whether anyone's listening, I don't really think so. But
we're web developers. We have a passion for this, and other people look at us like we have 5 heads. But
yeah, this is true. I mean, you either love the web or you don't. I think there's very little middle ground. But I don't know a lot of people who dislike the web for its low frictionness of things. Yes, we have compatibility problems, but I still remember compatibility problems on a lot of platforms. So it's not the end all be all. Like, this is the one way to do things. Otherwise, that would be really boring too.
Yeah. And sometimes old techniques come back, right? There's things that we've learned from, languages that we don't use anymore and frameworks that we don't use anymore that like make sense now with the way that the web is. Like, oh, well, maybe we should incorporate that with certain things.
Well, yeah, and techniques change, right? Now we still pack things into groups and everything, and the reality is that you look at David's just rolling by, and it's a very hectic background today.
Stickman Ventures, everyone. You want to go and work for a fun place? Stickman Ventures.
Random Firebase headbands and all. So yeah, you look at the techniques we're using today, where you end up having, we pack everything up and minimize and all these things, and now with H2, like we have streams. Like, I don't need to pack all these things up, and I get better perf. So techniques will always change, and what's new becomes old, and what's old becomes new again. And you just always have to sort of be on the lookout. And then hopefully we highlight those things so people know exactly where they should be sort of looking. And there's lots of people out there doing the very same thing. So it's a cool time to be developing, as they say.
Yeah, man. As long as tables don't come back for layouts, I'm good.
I won't miss that. Don't miss it at all.
So you want to roll us out?
Sure. This has been another episode of the Web Platform Podcast. I'm Justin Ribeiro. He's Eric Eikenson. Danny was here previously, but had to go to a meeting because we do have jobs. We will see you next time, wonderful people.
All right.